So now I want to turn the spotlight over to you, Prem. Prem is going to be leading this class. And he's teaching us today about how to live without fear. I've had the privilege of learning from Prem the last couple of years, and even beyond that, I had been taking some of his classes. I've become like a dedicated student of Prem's, and I've learned so much. And so I have gotten incredible value just from Prem's presence and teachings and insights. And so of course, I just want to share this with everybody. So I look at it this way. I love to share what I love with people who I love. That's the whole idea behind all of this, is like bringing value to my clients and then extending that out to my other communities. It just goes without saying the amount of respect and admiration I have for Prem. And of course, so much respect and appreciation for you all for being on this call today. And just taking time out of your life to be here and to show up for, experiencing the unknown. So again, I'm just so grateful for this opportunity and to be able to share space in this way. So
Mm.
Prem, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. Um, First of all, my salutations to all of you. As I said before, I want to say again, to just be in Stephanie's presence is so invigorating and enlivening. And even you won't believe it that she's as good of a student as she is a teacher, which is kind of a difficult thing to be. When somebody is a teacher, they usually want to be perceived or look like teachers alone. And what I like about Stephanie, she's just very natural and very true to herself, through her teaching, through her beliefs. So whatever she's sharing with you, she's sharing it from a deepest place in her heart. So I'm very honored to meet you all. Meeting you in a modern time on the Zoom, it's kind of fun. And also, I'm very happy to share whatever I I kind of have managed to learn in all these years. As you know, I have been, and I still am in a way, a monk for 26 years in the Shivananda tradition. So I taught for many years. I served for many years, and then about 6 years ago, I had this, I guess, need that was building for a little while to kind of retire in my own way, which meant to change just the mode of my living and take some intensity down and go deeper within myself and kind of explore some more of a teaching that I wasn't able to do in my time of service. So my teaching covers a lot of different subjects. It's not really mine. It's spiritual teachings that I've inherited. So from the teachings of yoga and philosophy, psychology of yoga and everything, to some practical things, to meditation and things like that. So that's what I teach. Although my latest passion is Sanskrit language, as a teacher, I do that. I'm studying now for the Masters of Sanskrit in India. So it's a kind of new thing. It's an old thing. So that's what I teach now most of the time, and in the evening sometimes give spiritual talks. Now, I would like to begin by just giving a little bit of a contemplation of this modern times we are in, and I understand that we are all facing some very challenging questions, and we're in need of some kind of a guidance also how to manage the stressful times. And I call it a life as looking at beyond just simply the appearances. So the first rule in uh, approaching your life as a spiritual foundation is try to look beyond what you just see, what you hear about, and also try to analyze the life not in terms of just events in isolation from one another, but if you really want to gain the wisdom, you will have to concentrate on a dynamic aspect of life as something that is continuously changing. And so when you do that, you don't look at the events in isolation from one another, but you look at the life as a stream or as a flux of things. And with every event having multi-layered sort of lessons for us. So even these modern times, with this particular problem of coronavirus, we have to look at it as a phenomenon that has a capacity to teach us many different things, and also will teach different people different things. So I always start with this. When people ask me what do I think of modern times, first of all, I tell them, don't worry, this will come to an end. Okay, so this is the first thing to know. We are already noticing from the 15th of April, which is what I was kind of having my own intuitive thought of it, that things will start to come down a little bit, and it will take probably another 2 to 3 for 4 weeks before things really open up. And as you can see it, you read it in the news, things are settling down a little better. Perhaps we'll never return into our world as before, but we become wiser, and we will enter into our world with more of a determination to create some space in our lives for things that really, really matter. And I think this is the first contemplation that can come to everybody's mind. When you're confined in your apartment or in your house, and you can have very little time to go out, what do you do apart from eating and doing different things? You start to think, okay, so what is life? What is the purpose of life? And in our teachings, we say that one has to have um, ideal set up in life, because it is the ideals that mold your life. It is the ideals that give the character to it, and in fact define you as a person. So many people live ideal less life, meaning that they live lives kind of haphazardly. They go along with things that happen. They maybe study a few things here and there, but they're not quite well defined in that sense. So a very important question would be, how do we live our 24 hours of the day? And we need to know how we want to live them. And also need to have a plan, not just for the day, but also we have to have a plan for the whole life. So normally what happens in spiritual life, we set up like a grand goal, which some people may call it God, some people call it love, like unconditional love. You can call it truth, whatever you want, happiness. It doesn't matter. So we set up that, and then we try to link everything that we do to that central goal. So let's say we eat. Then the question is, why do we eat? And why do we eat specific foods? Because we want to obviously be healthy, or we want to live a long life. Then the next question is, well, why do you want to have a long life? So like it has to, whatever you determine to do, whatever activities you do, you have to link them to your central purpose in life. And this is a perfect time to actually do it. you know you can all take a moment, and like just like with Stephanie, with your notebooks on the side, you have a little vision board, and you say, okay, this is what I want to do and want to become, you know and and then you can set up a little diary. You can have some kind of a journal where you can monitor your practice, set them up, learn how to structure your practices, and then you can ask Stephanie to look at them over and then give you feedback. And then you can have a feedback as a group. Let's say you decide to do several exercises. Some of them will be your individual exercises, some of them could be a common exercise for your group. Then you should have a feedback. Like, I'm sure you do have some feedback anyway, but this can be done perhaps in a more like of a structured way in regards to spiritual practices, whether it's you're working with anxiety, you're working with fear, or you're working with actually positive things, which would be a better way of working with. Just to initiate some thought power, it is better to concentrate on a positive goal than to concentrate on something that really bothers you and it pulls you down and like that. It's like, if you're in a bad mood, is it better to be surrounded by bad people? I mean, those that pull you down, or is it better to be surrounded by good people? Naturally, you want to be surrounded by good people. Similarly, in life, it's always better to concentrate on the positive, because of the power of human mind is such that it creates what it thinks about, and it draws to itself, and eventually create the conditions based on the quality of your thoughts. So all these little things are part of our growing. I always think that there is cosmic intelligence that is much more complex than any one of us put together, all our minds. And within that intelligence, there are two important things. One is the knowledge aspect, the learning aspect, and the second one is the love aspect. So to be able to comprehend this, as I said, one, you have to look at the life as it is just one flowing thing, and there are different kinds of lessons that arise with each situation. And maybe if you would like to begin your little journey already, you could have your own contemplation of the corona time, virus time. How, what, how can we make this into an experience that is transformative for all of us? And what do we think that that this particular time, this particular crisis is teaching me as an individual and everybody else, and as a community? What are we supposed to see? And if you really observe some signs, you'll be surprised that cosmic intelligence, first of all, and acts with some dose of love. It can become very tough at times, but that's if you break a lot of rules and laws. Then if you're disobedient to the natural laws, that's the nature sometimes comes in and shows you. For example, if you eat sometimes bad food, initially the cosmic intelligence is not immediately interested in sort of giving a lesson or punishing you or anything like this. In fact, don't even think in terms of the word punishment, but it waits and it allows human beings to, uh, in a sense, experiment with their life. Make your experiments. As you do that, you can, she wants to see whether we're mending our way, whether we're changing our way, and she has a lot of patience. But sometimes if you overdo it, let's say with a bad food or bad lifestyle, you may get sick, or you may get feel like, in some way you may feel that your freedom that you had before has been constrained and limited. And that's how the intelligence works. It sets the limits and it sets the boundaries which you couldn't put yourself. And in a sense, this is what's happening now. Let us think about this. Before this coronavirus came, we lived our lives with such an incredible speed that the majority of people could not even keep up with, right? The speed of life that is based on materialistic philosophy, uh, which is what most people live, is such that it creates the conditions of life which are completely out of balance, and not just out in balance like within oneself but with one another. And we are out of balance also with nature. So all of that each one of us see. We do not need to be super smart to see what actually has been going on and what's going on now. And I always ask people, you know what, if you think that the life prior to this coronavirus was so wonderful, do you really think that? Majority of people say, my God, it was very hard. Something had to break, and this is what it broke it. What it broke it is that for the first time, I live in Manhattan here on the 22nd Street and Second Avenue. For the first time, I hear the birds outside. You know, so that's what it took. It took something heavy, because you need the sledgehammer sometimes in life. If you don't want to hear things properly, then, you know, we 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 cannot change fast, sufficiently fast, because we're just too stuck in our ways of enjoying things and wanting things to be a certain way. But as much as we think we're enjoying, we're also under horrendous stress. And I say the speed of life is like that, and the technology also increases the speed of things, because this time now is qualified by what we may call the element fire. The fire accelerates things, right? Everything is moving very fast. Now you live like in 10 years what your grandparents lived in 50 years, all of the changes and everything. So we need to understand how fire acts, and we have to make sure that we use that knowledge for our own transformation, and for the quick transformation of ourselves, but in a positive way. So please look at the life, what's happening now. Apparently Himalayas can be seen for the first time from India, which is a very rare thing. We got dolphins swimming around Venice or something like that. We have the nature awakening. For the first time now, you feel like some cold coming from that crispy cold of the spring, and you wonder, why is it all of a sudden cold? And I'll tell you what I think it is. First of all, we moved with such, I have to picture this before we tackle anxiety, fear. We want to see something positive coming out of it. but because before we see something as positive, we have to also remember that that the speed at which we lived, the quality of life we lived, in fact, is unsustainable, whether individually or collectively as a humanity. With the speed that we're ruining the whole nature and everything, destroying the planet left and right, we cannot not go unpunished for that. So the nature has reached its own limit and is saying, okay, you guys, if this is what you need, I'm gonna send you a warning. In fact, this is only a warning. This is nothing like 1918 when the plague came and it knocked out 50 million people. No, we're still actually not in the bad conditions. So in some ways, we have contributed to destroying this beautiful world as humanity, as you know. We destroyed the numerous species of animals and other things. And why did we do that? There's only one answer: greed. Okay, so what we were looking for was for an expansion within the physical environment, which we may call in a yin and yang. This will be yin. So what happens is that what you need is an expansion in a spiritual sense, and that is called the yin in the mental or spiritual dimension. So this yin and yang combination has to be such that by itself creates some balance, right? The yin and yang is not about just talking all kinds of different things. We're looking for a good amount of yin and good amount of yang to be happy. So what happens is that the extreme yin transforms itself into yang. So the incredible speed with which beings move is the quality of a yin. It's an expansion within a space, has been transformed itself into a very intense yang, which is what happened is that yang, all of a sudden, everything stopped. Have you noticed that? It is such a contrast. It is exactly what one extreme created. Now, of course, we're not going to stay there forever. So anyway, this is how you have to think. It's rather wonderful because now we're not moving physically too much, but we can move at least mentally. So I think that we need to understand this, that what we call a progress in the material world, in fact, it's I would say it's a sacrifice of the biological world and the humanity in the name of some whatever pleasures, greed, this and that. This is how I think so. You know, in the name of progress, the very humanity which is supposed to benefit from the progress is being sacrificed. The fellow beings, the human beings are poisoned and robbed by the other human beings. We have genetically modified food. We don't have foods anymore. We don't have air. All the basic sources of energy, the survival, have been compromised. Who wants to continue that way? I would say, come on, give me 2 months or whatever break. I want to think how we can solve this. So you have to think in this way, that the nature is reclaiming what it is. It's also reclaiming our own right to be one with it. So even if it's only for short time, the nature is reclaiming her own glory by making us think and by making us want to be healthy and bright and smiling and all that. How many people smile in New York City? You have to do a survey for that. You know, very few people smile and very few people laugh. Do you think that's normal? I don't think so. Sometimes when I go to the Long Beach there, I sit on the subway. It's so miserable. Like you could be almost in some kind of, wherever, graveyard or something like that. So we lost all this because we disconnected ourselves from the nature. And I said, maybe you feel it, maybe you don't, but it is still very crisp and a little colder than it was before. I will tell you the reason why. The cold is back because all of a sudden the seasons are resetting themselves. Maybe not big on a big level, but we see, for example, we have blossoms here in Manhattan, and I tell you, these blossoms normally very quickly turned into leaves and fruits and everything. Now they slow down. They said, oh, wait a second, it's still cold. So this is just a joy to understand that nature has created seasons, and we should look forward to every season in nature, just as we should look to every season in our life, right? Every period of our life, because there's a beauty in feeling cold, there's a beauty in feeling heat, there's a beauty in welcoming rains, all these things were just forgotten because we're so busy. And basically, when we're so busy, also, we're not able to stop. Have you ever tried to stop? It's like trying to stop the whole mountain falling on you or the river that's going at you. So, what we need to do is to think like this. When you think of nature, don't think of nature as something outside of you. Remember that the nature is not divided into outside and inside. She may appear to exist outside, but her field of operation and functioning, her continuous field of operation is also on our inside, meaning our body and mind. So we are really one. If you study some very traditional old scriptures there in China, you will see, for example, how a person who um, how there's a relationship between the governments and the organs and the nature itself. So, for example, a president, God bless us now, but represents the heart, and that represents the overall circulation of things, represents something else in nature like that. This is how they used to picture it. So anyway, the nature teaches us many things. Maybe you heard of the word avatara. I don't know if you have. Avatara is like you probably remember the movie Avatar, but Avatara is the Hindu concept of a god incarnating for the purposes of benefiting the human beings and removing bad things. So usually happens at the very large crisis in time. This Avatara comes, but the real avatar is the appearance of a crisis that has some healing quality. And so the avatar, that aspect of the learning and healing and everything, happens at any critical moment, not just occasionally, but actually happens all the time. So I've given you some little idea on how that looks like in from this perspective, of course. Now, looking at this, we have to think about that even the phenomena like this coronavirus have lessons embedded in them. So, as I said, I invite you to, rather me telling you what they are, I'm inviting you to think about them. But today we're going to address just also the problem of how to deal with our mind during these critical times. And I would say that mastering fear and anxiety and all that, it's much more difficult to master in challenging times, in critical times. Whereas it's better to have this as your principle, to try to work with your worries, anxieties, and fear of any kind at times when you don't have them. So they're more effective. It's like sowing the seeds the where you don't have too much of a wind and too much of a water and everything. So you want the seeds to properly blossom. So this is whatever, take birth. So this is the idea. Um, Nevertheless, I will first of all tell you, from my perspective, is that everything in life happens for the best. This is to be known, to meditate it on. This is what we say. Everything, even the smallest annoyance to the biggest temptation or challenge, is always calculated by the divine intelligence to give you the best what you need at a given time. I don't know if you can accept this. If you can, if you can't, then I can continue, because this is exactly where we have to stand. Do we really know what is always best for us? I don't think so. So you need life to help you. Since I said we and nature are not different, meaning we and life are not different, then whenever we need a lesson is something, the life comes and gives it to us. Now, for a spiritual aspirant who is highly awakened, these lessons are given moment by moment, minute by minute. Person can learn everything, you know, like a Native American people lived. And we have also similar teachings in India. Uh, you open your eyes, you see a sky there, you see a bird flying from left to right, and you say something will happen. You know, they used to read like this, omens and signs like this. Now, I'm not saying read the omens and become, obsessed with that, but what I'm trying to say is that everything has its own lesson. You know, for example, in the Chinese medicine, we say if the pimple appears somewhere on the face, it did not appear accidentally in that particular place, right? Because the pimple sits on some meridian, right? So that meridian is connected to some organ. So therefore, there is some change, little or big change in the organ that causes the pimple to arise exactly in a particular place. So we need to turn a little bit to the Eastern teachings for comprehending this kind of connections and for comprehending the life in a more dynamic sense. You see, so that's a different philosophy, and I invite you to do that. So this is how we think of it. So everything has its own lesson. For example, your sadness has its lesson. Maybe your grief has its lesson. Maybe your laughter has its lesson. If it doesn't have it for you always necessarily, it does have for others. So we in this amazing world, we share the lessons all the time. If there is something that is frozen in you, it doesn't want to react, it's desensitized, some lesson will come like this and wake you up. May come in a form of love, it may come in a form of some other things, it can come in millions of forms. So the whole idea is that the life always works and continuously works for you, not ever against you. And this is what we need to remember. If you want to understand life, never look at it as a punishment for anything. Always think of it, okay, well, this happens. I don't quite understand why it happened, but I'm sure in 5 months from now, a year from now, I will see why something happened. Remember the moments in your life when you had some very big crisis, right? And you were like so nervous and you didn't know what to do. You were thinking it's the end of your world and everything, only to realize that sometime after, maybe 10 months from there, or even 10 days from there, you can breathe and you can say, oh, I see, this is what it is. There are people who sometimes separate from one person, and then 3 months later they meet somebody they really love. It could be the other way around. Sometimes you can meet somebody who's really good and meet somebody who's disaster, but nevertheless you get two lessons there, not one. So in any case, whether you're meeting a person, whether you're going someplace, you can actually see that there are lessons there. So remember, this is the first principle. Whatever happens, happens for the best. There's a little story that I can tell you. Once upon a time, there was a man who was um, who was a king anyway. And so he had a son. The son went hunting, and as he was hunting, he fell off the horse and he broke his leg or something. And then he came back, and the minister of the king says, everything happens for the best. Why? Because next day they were going into the war and they couldn't take him because he had a broken leg. Something like that. There is a story, many more little aspects of it, but I don't need to bother you with that. Yes, yes, it is a great story. Um, so we need to cultivate this thinking that is going to, when you start to accept things as they are, we may call it also a surrender in some ways, because if something has happened and it cannot be immediately changed, there's only one thing you can do, and that is to accept it. As you accept it, there's a certain feeling of calmness, and there's also some better discriminative power that comes, and all kinds of benefits arise from it. But when things happen for the best, they do not happen always in accordance or in accordance with our desires. That's what we need to remember. Yes, it would be wonderful if only the best things happen to us what we like, but things happen to us as we need them, not as we necessarily desire them. So sometimes it seems that what's happening in your life, it goes contrary to what the normal human being would ever want, but nevertheless it's a big part of our learning, and we can see this at the end of the story. I would say, that our heritage is divine. And the worst thing that we can do to ourselves is to succumb to fear. Because fear destroys everything, including, our discriminative power. It destroys our creativity, everything. So I'm going to say a few words about the fear itself and what I think one should do and how to cultivate it. But remember, the main relationship that needs to be mastered in your mind when you think about these things, how difficult these actually benefit you. Well, this is a tough one, right? If I say difficulty, that also means that certain aspects of our personality that are not acceptable even to us also can work for us. You have to be like an alchemist. You need to know how to make your anger work for you, how your anxiety can work for you, and all these things. So, um, there's a story, St. Paul, something, he was praying to God and it says, why did you, give me this terrible quality, whatever it was, and then the Lord said to him, so that you can remember me, so that you can develop positive strengths and things like that. Think about the person who suffers from irritation, right? So that person realizes one time that the irritation that they have is, destroying a lot of things in their life, is destroying friendships, relationships, opportunities, and everything. So one day they decide to, you know, deal with this, to try to learn to transform it, control it, name it, whatever it can be done. So you look at back at the quality. Now the person becomes transformed. It becomes an embodiment of patience and forgiveness and all things. And then all the goodies that came along the way, now the person can count. Like, so, oh my God, yeah, that's the result of it. But without having had that impatience, that person would have never evolved into what he or she is. I'm not saying embrace your weaknesses in a way that you say, oh, these are my little brothers and sisters. No, you have to use them to increase your awareness. And whenever you have a weakness or some kind of a problem in your life like this, it actually adds an additional alertness into your life. So you have to pay attention to what's in front of you. What is it's like a person who went through AA program. Maybe you know that. So that person obviously has had problems with some kind of an addiction. Although I would say all people have some problems with some addiction or the other. They may not be called as addictions, they may not be called as patients, but everybody has some addictive forms of behavior. Nevertheless, what happens is the person has been healed to some degree, and then what they do is that they're always on alert. They always like additionally, I would say, they have an additional alertness in relation to their life, which they can use for other things. So please look at the difficulties and problems as something that can work for you rather than against you. This is a different philosophy to what you've been exposed to. Our educators don't teach us this way. Our parents don't teach us this way. So what happens is that we have a lot of the psychology within us that has been rejected. There are parts of ourselves that have been rejected. We think everything's horrible. Fear is bad. This is bad. This is bad. And so we live in this schizophrenic kind of relationship with our own self. So if you want to master any of the emotions and everything, you have to have a total acceptance of all of your life and then work from there in the direction of positive, like you already been doing for quite some time. So what happens, as long as there's a part of you that you keep on rejecting, I don't like this about me, so I am not even dealing with it. It's sitting someplace and it's causing you a problem. And many people live like this. They live in a very mechanical also world. Part of the mechanical world is rejection, and part of it is also that they just live mechanically. And living mechanically means that they're not really aware of what kind of thoughts pass through their minds and all that. So each one of us has some anxieties, each one of us some small fears and this and that, but we can grow out of it. So now I'm going to introduce you a little bit to the actual subject of fear, if I can. And we know that life sometimes tells scary tales, right? And fear is a master of it. And look, for example, at what people run against in the course of a few hours. It's a lot of fear. And this fear can be that can exist on a subconscious level. Some husband is afraid of wife, wife is afraid of her own partner or somebody like this. There's hardly any person in this world that is not afraid of something or the other. A soldier or policeman can go into, fight the criminals or whatever, but he or she may be afraid of small spiders or snakes or something like that. It's quite normal. Right. So what we need to do is to think of the fear, first of all, as an instinct. And how can we fight that instinct? This is important to try to look at that. There's techniques for it. You see, instincts are generally seen as enemies in spiritual life, and we have to obviously overcome them, transcend them somehow. And there are circumstances in life in which instinct is an excellent guide, and also the circumstances where it is just the reverse. So when a person who is still not spiritually developed um, lives as his or her life, they have a lot of instincts that they share in common with animals, right? And so the instinct for animals and for many people like that is probably a most reliable guide. But once the brain is developed and a person evolves to a higher level, what happens is that we begin to need other kind of guides. We cannot be guided by the instincts. We need to be guided by the reason or intelligence, which is what happens. So for an animal, naturally, a fear is guide to be trusted because the fear can save an animal, but um, a human being can no longer be guided by fear in that case. So what's necessary in order to conquer fear, several things are needed. One is that we embrace a spiritual life. I have to say this: without a teacher or without a meditative practice, without a prolonged spiritual practice, the fear cannot be overcome. You can overcome fear to some degree here and there, but we also have to remember that the fear is quite an old enemy, so we need to work with that. So there's a wonderful remedy for fear. I'll give you right away the answer, and that is love. There's no better remedy for fear than love. Why? Because if you love, you no longer fear. This you will see where this teaches us. See, knowledge is also effective, but it's not as effective as love, because love is also a form of an instinct, just like fear, and it springs from a very deep dimension. And so, in this case, one instinct can easily be defeated by another instinct. Now, we're not going to obviously limit the understanding of love to instinct alone, but just for the sake of this talk, I'm just trying to give you some idea. So, there are times, of course, when you know we can use the knowledge and everything, but I'm saying that the love is the best, and it is the effects of love are more long lasting and very reliable. So it's interesting. For example, when a mother, or let's say when a woman sees a stranger at night, and she sees a stranger is in danger, not knowing him, she may hesitate to risk her life to save that person. But if it were her own child who was in danger, she would not hesitate. So this love gives a kind of almost a form of courage, right? Because the love is that which will beat fear in a sense. So such a person would, without a second thought, rush to the rescue of the child. So basically, what this means is that also if if we can cultivate this quality of love properly, we will find that we feel less. There is a philosophical um, and spiritual truth in it, that fear arises only in the presence of something that seems external to us and it seems to be different from us. And in the spiritual teachings, we say there's only oneness, and the love confirms that experience of oneness. That's why this lady or mother runs to save her child, whereas she would not necessarily feel for another person because she doesn't feel that love for the other person. So only love can really give you the greatest form of courage. So in other instances, also it's true that sometimes knowledge can be effective. For example, you lose your way through a forest for something and you don't know how to come back and you become frightened. But if you have a compass, if you have a torch or flashlight, and then you have no need to be afraid. So basically, we need to have both, I would say. See, cultured people, civilized people, are not afraid of things that animals are still afraid of, like fire, natural phenomena, and all that. They're not necessarily afraid of the elements or the forces of nature, but they are afraid of maybe another person, their wife or husband or neighbor or boss, or modern people are afraid of loneliness, illnesses, poverty, death, all these things. So, what do we need to do to cultivate um, uh, fearlessness, a quality? I will tell you easy solution for everything. One, let's say if you ever find yourself in any kind of thought of fearing something, worried about something, what is the best thing to do is try to stay absolutely calm for an instant. So you want to become calm. Try not to move, not to say a word. You can do one little spiritual practice. You can clench your right fist and take a deep breath and unite yourself in thought with the supreme reality. You may call it God or Lord, any way you like. And in this way, you will be able to control your literally your cells of your body. So staying quiet, clenching the right fist, and then uniting yourself spiritually or mentally with that where you have the greatest belief in, that will all of a sudden bring some control of that. So then, of course, you can do whatever you need to do to escape that kind of a danger, let's say, or whatever. But the first condition, the most important, is you begin by staying absolutely still. And if you move too fast, all of a sudden you move at once, you will be kind of releasing a dam, and the flood waters of that fear and instinct will sweep everything away beyond your control. So if you notice sometimes when people like see something that they're afraid of or whatever, the immediate thing is to just run. But what we need to learn to do is to remain motionless, almost thoughtless for an instant. I would say that peace that you're going to create for a few moments will be a perfect condition for the mobilization of various beneficial forces that are dormant within you. So you will feel you will feel them springing into action, and you will witness their power. Okay, so that's a one important thing. Now, if this is applicable in regards to a situation in the physical world, then we could also say this law holds good both for the internal as well as the external worlds. So when you feel that you're also being threatened from within, try not to run away. Otherwise, your enemy will simply chase you, and it will become faster and faster and faster, and you will be pursued and eaten. So the way to do this is to react it as you would be with some kind of a dog, right, that is barking. So you look at that thing that is making you fear. You know, you stare at it in face. And just like in India, I've had this experience when the dogs go after you, you stare at them and they will turn their tail and run away. So this is what you can do. So this is called facing the the um, the situation. I think it's a very important thing to do. See how we human beings are at the mercy of our own fears. And the reason for it is because we're lacking some form of knowledge in relation to the events or situations that cause it. So what we are missing is light of knowledge. We know the proof for it. When you enter into a dark house and you feel you don't know where you're getting into, and you feel like very nervous, and you only feel safe when you have some kind of a light. So basically, we conclude from this that even in spiritual life, psychological life, what we need is some form of a light. And just like the physical light removes the fear of physical darkness, so interestingly enough, also we can see that, um, you know, the psychological problems also require some form of a light like that. So the next thing I would say is to make it into a life principle to not react unnecessarily to whatever the events take place or whatever people say, or even to your own negative thoughts. When I say don't react to your negative thoughts, meaning don't go along with them. You can react in a positive way. So what this means is that you have to learn to develop courage in a deeper sense of the word. That means in all situations, starting from the smallest to the greatest, starting from the material things such as finances and will I have this and will I have to those that matter in your psychological, psychic life and everything. How, without a smallest shudder, you have to learn to not react to anything whereby you would let your heart beat fast, your nerves tremble, you're full of emotions, you feel butterflies in your stomach. Like all that, you have to learn to control it. Take a deep breath, as we said, clench your right fist, and you say, nothing will move within me. This is how it is. Always um, back to the stillness. Last time I shared with you some little meditations. I hope you got them. I don't know, but oh, with this, try to learn that whatever takes place, you simply do not allow your physical body to go along with that instinctive tendency to just think it's a catastrophe, it's a tragedy, or whatever. So that's the that's the basic idea. Now I want to ask if you have any questions. I know that the gentleman had a wonderful question, so I'm going to say to you, Filippo, what I would suggest is first of all, from what I've studied, so you seem to be discussing some more kind of a condition of acidic blood, which leads to a weakened from Chinese point of view, Chinese medicine point of view, a weakened immune system. which is the obviously the weakening of the kidney and a bladder area, which constitutes one energy kind of a field in itself. So uh, the blood changes when I give you an example how we analyze this. When the blood become acidic, then the quality of saliva changes. Then you may have some little like sores in your mouth, things like that. That's the beginning of showing you that your immune system is weak. You may have a back pain. So I'm not exhausting the all these possible things, but the diet would be the best thing to begin with. And you can talk to Stephanie. I would say 10 days is necessary to change the red blood cells. So that is the first change you're going to see if you eat well, non a food that doesn't create acidity in your body, like sugar, coffee, or you know, cheese and fat and all this. What we really need is in our diet. I don't know what Stephanie is teaching you. I'm sure she's a master of it, but more grains, grain-like food, more beans, grains, and vegetables. Simply speaking, the rest I leave it to you to go into details. But sometimes the acidic blood condition can happen for many years. You know, it can take 10, 15 years to build it up into a problematic thing. Since you're very young, you're fine. You have no problems. You have Stephanie on your right hand side. She will heal you. But I would begin with the diet because the diet is easy to monitor, and then 120 days it takes for white blood cells to change, so you have perfect conditions. And I will tell you, when you work on alkalizing your blood, you're also going to find your moods are going to change. And I would say the most dangerous guy that we all love is the Mr. Sugar. Coffee, yes, so no more coffee, good. um, I will leave Stephanie this. Very good. All of that with Stephanie, and I would say with some good acupuncturist, you know, with some yoga and everything, whatever you're learning, all a little plan you need. You see, in the cases, just what I was telling you, I'm like this too. If you have some problem like this, you have to welcome it. You say, oh my God, this is a wonderful opportunity for me to change my life a little bit, discipline my life. You know, maybe I was too loose with this and that. And you find that it's an enjoyable thing to go from the place where you felt unwell and maybe mentally or physically, to a place of some wellness. And that's my first suggestion. Now, regarding this coronavirus, I'm just telling you, take this as a wonderful opportunity for yourselves to actually create a new way of thinking, a new way of acting, because once this lifts up everything, you're back into work, right? You're back to doing things and running around. But what you want to do is to create some seeds now that are necessary for you to cultivate some meditative practice, awareness or mindfulness, whatever you call it. And those seeds, you should put them now, because now you can consider yourself as if you were in a retreat, literally, because this is a retreat time. And what do we do in retreats? We're not distracted by other things. We take time to go within. I will say, take this chance 100%. So, Stephanie, guide us into some light, that you're the light. Philip, thank you. Oh, yes, I can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this is the problem with media, Media is like you have to read in between the lines, or read just a simple and see what, here and there. You want to know what's going on, but don't overdose on media. I always say this because this is worse than anything. Yes, good, Filippo. So, Stephanie, please, you're my leader here. You say whatever you want to say.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just say that Filippo, I'll send you a chart. It shows alkaline acidic foods, and it's just a good guide to kind of go by. I want to open it up if anyone has any other questions. Is that cool, Prem? Can we do that?
Hmm.
Anyone have
I'm
any
waiting
questions?
for this. Wonderful. Somebody's coming in.
Anyone have a question?
No question. I hope I wasn't too abstract or anything. Sometimes it takes a little time to establish some little rapport with people. And, you know, I tend to not even talk too much about the fears and stuff. I prefer to concentrate on positive things. But since this is a time that is good to address it, I did a little bit of it.
I have a
If I
question.
Yes.
Go ahead, Marianne, and then Krista, go ahead. But Marianne, go first.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for this talk because it's enlightening, but it's more so reinforcing because I do know all of these things, and fear sometimes trumps, I think, your knowledge, and it makes it challenging to practice what you know. And so I appreciate your talk and the reinforcement of what I know how to do. And I think that we need to be more in touch with ourselves and meditate more so that we can pinpoint exactly what our emotions are and be able to address them appropriately. I think that really is the key. And I do like also, what you were saying, everybody says, no, not everybody, but I know that things happen for the best, and I know that this will pass. I don't think that we immediately learn the reasons why things happen all the time, but I do believe in my heart that things do happen for the best as well. So I want to thank you, and I really, really do appreciate the time that you've given us today.
Oh,
Thank you.
you're most welcome. Thank you. Um, and there was another question, or
Go ahead, Krista. You want to ask? Krista had a question.
Yeah, so you said something about when you get into a state of fear, just like an instant kind of cure for this, you hold the wrist like this. Sorry.
yeah,
How do you,
fist.
oh,
Yeah,
fist. Okay, on the
fist.
right hand side. How long do you hold it for?
It's just for as long as you need to kind of feel that you establish that connection, and to just until the peace is manifested to some degree.
So you
It
just kind
really
of focus
helps.
on going into source, into God, into love, into while you're
Yes,
doing it. Okay.
yes, yes.
Okay.
It's like what you're trying to do is you're trying to intercept your thought process. What happens when we have negative thoughts in our mind tends to race at a pretty high speed, right? And the more afraid we are, the faster the mind works. So you can think of the speed of the mind also being relevant here. And you need something to do is to kind of stun it or to stop it. And sometimes when people have like um, some crisis and they start to shout to somebody shakes them up and says, stop, stop, stop. And similarly, you do this to your mind in a way, by in a more gentle way. And you just say, okay, this, I'm not taking you can even use what's called the self-talk in a positive way. We have that as a technique. And you just say, okay, listen, mind. You talk to your mind as if it was somebody outside. And you just say, okay, you know what? We have been in this kind of situations many times in our life. We do not need to panic, and we're going to be just practical about what needs to be done. And then you say, and you fear, you get out of my mind. I have nothing to do with you. I'm going to just remain calm. And then whatever it takes to get the calmness back, everything helps. Breathing helps and all this. But at the time when our mind starts to race, you only have to like really say, okay, this is enough. You're like pulling the reins of the horses back, and you say, okay, stop, and then wait. And then as you're connecting, the fist is always good. Like, you'll think when you're a child, like you do something like that. So basically, I would suggest you try it, and also try to catch your mind throughout the day when it starts to build this imagination and catastrophes and suggest you that things are really going to be bad. And as I say, if you if you tend to if you're susceptible to fear, then please don't read the news much. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Ask
for
your friend what's
sure.
going on. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I
Stephanie will
stopped.
tell you.
I stopped watching the news. There's a few channels that I watch, it's like fear porn. You know, it's just totally like crazy. And then your mind ends up like, oh my God, all of the grocery stores are going to close. And oh my God, this means that, and all these things. And it's really funny because, like you said, we're more than halfway out of this. We're past the hump or whatever, and we're just on our way back, you know.
Yeah, I have to tell
So,
you, just put this behind you. This whole thing is done. I mean, it may
yeah.
take whatever, even if it takes 1 to 2, it doesn't matter. It will all be fine. What you need to do is to create the foundation for yourself where you can say, oh my God, I'm going to smile more. I'm going to laugh more. I'm going to talk to
Hmm.
my friends more. I'm going to exercise more. And maybe we need a new paradigm of life where we do not have to work 12 hours a day, but we can actually have a little time for whoever is important in our life and for our own practice. I mean, honestly, this is fundamentally what, to me, this crisis is telling me. Okay, you cannot go at this speed. You will kill yourself. In fact, what would have happened if this didn't happen is that people will be just racing headlong into catastrophe, in self-destruction. That's how I see it. It may not be 100% correct. But we now also have Kelly. Would you like to ask something? Kelly?
Yes, you're
Hi.
Coach Kaylee. Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
I really appreciate everything you're saying. I wrote everything down.
Oh, wow. Okay, good.
I was like, oh, that's good.
I
Something
want a
you said.
copy of those notes.
Yeah.
I'll post a picture. um, Something you said earlier that like really struck me was be like an alchemist to your anxiety, your anger, kind of like your shadow or your ego, be the alchemist of it. And I like that phrasing. I was just wondering if maybe we could get like a personal example from your life of a moment where you channeled that energy and used it towards something, just as an example.
Oh, surely, surely. I mean, I would just generalize it now a little bit, but I would say, um, first of all, I grew up in a very difficult situation. My mother was schizophrenic, and my father was, for most of the time alcoholic. So it was like a difficult situation. They separated at the age of 8. So anyway, when I was a kid like this, I was thinking, you know what? I see that if two people cannot agree with one another, why do they have to be violent to one another? Then I was thinking, what is the general problem? And then even as a kid, I used to think the mind. And say, okay, so the mind is the first problem. The second thing that I was thinking, that there are a lot of things that we have within us. Our histories are not always clean and beautiful and everything, right? We have experiences, we have things that we've done to other people, people have done to us. There are a lot of small or big events in our life that we just simply wanted to put out of our life, not think of them anymore, which is sometimes useful if you have a trauma, right? You don't want to go back into it. But then comes the time when you realize that who you really are is all these experiences put together and something higher, obviously something beyond the experiences. So I found that a need to embrace all of my personality before I can actually continue uh, to progress. So that meant all of the things that I call it a humanity. For example, lack of self-confidence, which I suffer from myself. Different sort of problems, obviously fear-based here. And then lust and anger and all this thing, I had them like everybody else. And so what I learned is that these things do not need to control my life, but I can utilize their energy to cultivate something different or even opposite to it, as long as I'm not pushing them away. Because what happens when you push away a negative quality, it starts to, counteract, meaning it starts to, it's like, let's say I'm angry, right? And then I'm saying, I should not be angry, I should not be angry, should not. And at that moment, I'm just getting more and more angry. And in fact, then you explode at the end of it. So I think what's important is to um, allow these things to be part of your life. But of course, when you're dealing with a particular emotion, you need to know what to do at that moment. We don't have time for that. But what I'm saying is that the more you're able to embrace of yourself in every possible way, the more you will be able to also embrace other people. And you're going to be able to have, you are not going to love people only for what they make you happy for, but you're going to see that these people have their own lives and destinies that are beyond your control. And you start to kind of have a little, the embracing quality is essential to for good relationships. But embracing oneself, as I said, I cannot go into details of it, but certainly it transforms my relationship with my own issues and problems. And I say, okay, well, I got to have them for some reason. And that is that every person on this planet has some difficulties and challenges, and the God is given to us in order to stir us and spur us into activity. Otherwise, we'll be lazy. If everything was wonderful and everything we were lying down, nobody will make any progress. So we can chat about this some other time if you want. I thank you for asking. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Stephanie G.
So yeah, so I know we were supposed to end at 3:15, so I want to just respect everyone's time and of course Prem's time too. So thank you all so much for being here. Prem, thank you so much for
You're most welcome.
facilitating such a beautiful class for us. Do you want to do anything to close out the class, Prem?
No, I just want to wish you honestly all the best in your program. Maybe we'll see you again. I don't know, but I really think you're a special group of people. You have a special leader I hope I'm not overpraising you, but I'm just saying I think that way. You need company of each other also. So I just want to say, you know, put the full stop here, like just say no fear. From today, I'm going to live a fearless life. And maybe your mission should be like this around a fearless life begins now. That's it. And you will see that will lead you into dimensions of your existence and knowledge. You cannot believe it. Okay, children of light, keep on shining. Om, om, om. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachite Purnasya Purnamadai Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Krishna ki jai, Krishna ki jai. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone.
So much,
Thank you,
Prem.
Abhijit.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Okay,
Have a
Bye,
great
everybody.
bye
Thank
bye.
you, Prem.
Thank
you.
you. Bye.